Okay. Have you ever noticed this? Like, we all do this thing where we put off dealing with stuff until it becomes a way bigger problem than it needed to be.
Yeah.
It's kind of a human thing. Like
Yeah.
that deadline you keep pushing back, or, I don't know, maybe like a weird noise your car is making that
Right.
you just keep ignoring. And then, surprise, surprise, it turns into something way worse.
Mm-hmm.
So today we're going to take a deep dive into the psychology behind that. Why do we do that? Why do we wait for things to get really bad before we actually take any action?
Yeah.
We've got some fascinating research and some expert insights.
It's not just procrastination, though. I
Yeah.
mean, that is part of it. But there's actually some pretty deep psychological mechanisms at play here.
So let's start with the why. Why do we put up with uncomfortable situations, sometimes to the point where they become like major problems?
Well, one of the key factors is our aversion to ambiguity.
Hmm.
Humans have a natural tendency to prefer certainty over uncertainty,
Oh.
even if that certainty means there are going to be negative consequences.
Interesting.
We see this play out in a lot of different ways. Like in relationships, people stay in unhealthy relationships. They don't go get medical checkups when maybe they should.
So it's not just me being a chicken, like there's a name for this.
It's called the ambiguity aversion bias.
Oh, okay.
Think about this. Let's say you have a suspicious-looking Malay.
Right.
Okay. So you could go get it checked out.
Mm.
And that would mean you get some news. It could be good or bad news. But it's the uncertainty that keeps a lot of people from making that appointment.
Ah, okay.
They'd rather stick with the known discomfort than face the unknown, even if the unknown might be better.
Right. I can relate to that. So is this really just a fear of the unknown? Are we talking about fear here?
Fear is definitely part of it. It's not the only factor, though.
Okay.
Another big reason we wait is because we're reluctant to disrupt stability.
Okay.
Even if a situation's objectively bad, at least it's familiar.
Right.
Right? We know what to expect. We know how to deal with it. But taking action means stepping into the unknown. And that can be really unsettling for people.
Right. I mean, even if it's a bad situation, at least it's a situation I know how to deal with.
Exactly.
I'll see how that would lead to inaction.
Yeah. So it's like the devil you know syndrome.
Okay.
So this is where the concept of the perceived threshold of actionability comes in.
All right. That sounds a little complicated. Can you break that down for me and for our listeners?
Yeah. So it's a lot simpler than it sounds.
Okay.
It basically means we all have this mental bar for when a problem becomes big enough to act on.
I see.
That bar is different for everybody, though.
Right.
And it's influenced by lots of different things.
Mm.
Your personality, past experiences, your culture, even.
Okay.
But essentially, we wait until a problem crosses that threshold before we feel justified in taking action.
It's almost like we need things to reach a certain level of badness before we do anything about them.
Yes.
Which kind of sounds crazy when you say it out loud.
Yeah. I mean, it might seem irrational,
Right.
but it's a very human response.
Uh,
And this ties into another reason we let things fester: subconscious self-sabotage.
ooh. Okay, now we're getting to the interesting part. Tell me more.
Yeah, so this might sound a little out there, but sometimes, like on a subconscious level, we might actually be invested in letting things get worse.
Really?
Yeah, and that's because it can confirm negative beliefs we have about ourselves.
Okay.
Like, I'm not capable, or I don't deserve good things,
Got it.
or maybe it feeds a need to feel like a victim or to avoid responsibility.
Wow. So we're not always just being lazy or procrastinating. There could be like some deeper psychological stuff going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And the important thing is to be aware of these patterns so we can start making conscious choices about how we respond to these challenges.
Okay, I'm ready to hear about those conscious choices. But before we get to solutions, I have to ask. You mentioned there might actually be an upside to waiting sometimes.
Yeah.
That seems counterintuitive. How can letting things get worse possibly be a good thing?
Yeah, it's true. Sometimes allowing a situation to unfold, I guess, before jumping in can actually be kind of beneficial.
Okay.
Like take gaining clarity, for instance.
Okay.
Waiting can give you some valuable time and information,
Right.
and that allows you to make a more informed decision.
Okay.
So it's kind of like you're gathering more data points before you take action.
I see. That makes sense. Like if you get a new job offer,
Yeah,
sometimes it's smart to wait and see what other opportunities might come up before you jump right in.
right, exactly. And sometimes that delay, forces us to build resilience.
Oh, okay.
We got to cope with discomfort and uncertainty. And research shows that can lead to something called post-traumatic growth.
Interesting.
So we actually come out stronger and be better equipped to handle future challenges.
So it's kind of like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger?
Yeah, in a way, yeah. It's about recognizing that challenges, even the ones that are unpleasant, can actually be opportunities to grow from.
Right.
Now, this isn't to say that we should go looking for hardship.
Right.
It's more about reframing our perspective, I guess,
Hmm.
on the difficult situations we face.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
So waiting isn't always a bad thing, but I'm guessing it's a delicate balance, right?
Well, absolutely. It's about recognizing those potential upsides,
Yeah.
but also being aware of the risks.
Right.
And speaking of risks, let's talk about when waiting backfires.
Okay, yeah, let's get real. What are the downsides of letting things fester?
I mean, the most obvious one is that problems rarely just solve themselves.
Yeah.
In fact, they usually get worse,
Right.
right? You know, like a small leak in your roof. You wait too long, and now you have a major water damage situation.
Exactly.
Or maybe there's an argument you're avoiding. It's just going to fester and create more resentment over time.
It's like that saying, a stitch in time saves nine.
Right,
It's
exactly.
that addressing problems early can prevent them from becoming something much bigger. But it's not just practical problems that get worse, is it?
No, you're right. Letting things fester can also really take a toll on our mental and emotional well-being,
Right.
and it can erode our self-confidence,
Yeah.
and that can lead to this vicious cycle of inaction.
Because if we keep avoiding challenges, we never get to prove to ourselves that we can actually handle them.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
We start to doubt our own abilities, and that makes us less likely to take action next time we face a challenge. And then there's the emotional drain, too, you
Yeah.
know, the stress, anxiety, the guilt of knowing you're avoiding something important.
Right. So we're talking about a real cost here to our time, our energy, our mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to see why this pattern of waiting can be so detrimental, but knowing all this, how do we actually break this cycle?
Well, now that we understand the why,
Oh.
we can start to shift gears and talk about some strategies for change.
Okay, good.
And the first step is self-awareness. You got to start paying attention to your patterns.
Okay.
So think back to times when you've let things slide. What were the triggers? What were the excuses you were telling yourself?
So it's about recognizing those moments when we're starting to rationalize inaction or maybe downplay a problem.
Yes, exactly. And once you're aware of the pattern, you can start to challenge it.
Okay.
So the next step is to lower that threshold for action. Instead of waiting for a full-blown crisis, start addressing issues when they're still small and manageable.
So instead of waiting for the leaky faucet to turn into a flood, I call a plumber at the first sign of a drip.
Exactly. It's about catching things early and preventing them from escalating. And that's where building confidence comes in, you know.
Okay.
When you start tackling these problems early, you start experiencing those little wins. You know, it reinforces your belief in your ability to handle things.
So you're saying that even small victories can help us break out of that cycle of inaction. I like that. But what about those times when we feel overwhelmed
Yeah.
and we don't even know where to start?
That's a great point. And that's when seeking support can be incredibly helpful.
Okay.
Talking to a friend, a mentor, maybe even a therapist.
Right.
These people can provide perspective, guidance, encouragement. Sometimes just voicing those concerns and brainstorming solutions with someone else can make a huge difference.
So it's about normalizing asking for help, recognizing that we don't have to go through this alone.
Exactly. And remember, you're not alone in this. This tendency to wait for things to get worse is incredibly common.
Right.
The important thing is to be aware of it, understand it, and develop strategies to break free.
That's a really empowering message. It's not about beating ourselves up for, past inaction. It's about recognizing we have the power to change.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of our listeners are thinking, okay, this all sounds good in theory, but how do I actually do this? What are some concrete actions that we can take starting today?
You're right. Knowing's only half the battle. How do we apply this stuff?
Right. What are some practical things our listeners can do to actually start, I don't know, breaking free of this waiting game?
Well, one of the most effective things is practicing mindfulness.
Mm.
You know, paying attention to your thoughts and feelings in the moment.
Okay.
And when you find yourself like making excuses for not doing something, gently challenge those thoughts.
Oh, okay.
Ask yourself, is this really true? Or what's the worst that could happen if I take action now? You might be surprised.
It's almost like you become like a detective in your own mind.
Right.
You're noticing those thought patterns that
Yeah.
lead to inaction, and you're like, nope, not going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Choosing a different path. But can we get even more specific? Like, what are some, I don't know, tangible things our listeners can do, like today, to start addressing things they've been putting off?
Sure. So here's a challenge for everybody listening. Think of one small thing you've been putting off.
Okay.
It can be anything. Making a phone call, cleaning out a closet, or finally having that difficult conversation.
Okay. Something that's been like in the back of your mind.
Yeah, exactly. Something that's been nagging at you.
Okay.
Okay, so here's the key. Commit to doing it today. No more excuses. No more waiting for the perfect time. Just do it.
Okay. I like that. It's like we're breaking down those mental barriers
Yeah.
and proving to ourselves that we can take action. But what if that one small step still feels like really overwhelming?
Sure.
What if it's like something that triggers a lot of fear or anxiety?
Well, and that's where those coping mechanisms we talked about earlier could really come in handy.
Right.
Seeking support, breaking it down into even smaller steps.
Right.
Or just, practicing some positive self-talk. Remember, it's progress over perfection.
I like that.
It's just about making that conscious effort to shift out of that waiting mode and into a more proactive mindset.
Right. And I think that's a fantastic takeaway. It's not about being, superhuman or anything. It's just about recognizing those moments
Right.
and choosing to move forward, even if it's just one tiny step at a time.
Exactly. And the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Right.
You'll start to see challenges as opportunities to grow, and you'll be amazed at what you can accomplish.
It's almost like we're building a muscle, right? Like
Well,
the more we practice this action taking,
Yeah.
the stronger we get. So to wrap things up today, I think what we've learned is that this waiting for things to get worse thing, it's a common human tendency, and it's got some pretty deep psychological roots, but it doesn't have to control us.
Right. By understanding it, recognizing the benefits and the risks,
Right.
and developing some strategies for change, we can break free and be more proactive in our lives.
Well, it's been a really insightful conversation today, and I hope everyone listening is feeling empowered. Me too.
To take charge and make those positive changes.
Yeah.
Remember, even those small steps can lead to really remarkable transformations.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thank you.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, keep taking action.